All right, so I like the way this afternoon's gone, and there's been some very beautiful moments in it. But John asked me to provide a little more information that has been developed by psychologists around the idea of adolescence. So if you're ready, I'll do that. Is that okay for you all?
Yeah, we're ready.
I had to do a little chapter for the book called what do sons stand to lose or gain in a sibling society? So I had to first go over the psychological works that have been done on development of boys to see what the normal development of boys have been in a paternal society or whatever for the last 2,000 to 3,000 years. What stages do they notice? Then the second part of it, how is that interrupted by the kind of culture we got now? So I'm going to do the first part of that a little bit. So we don't have much time, so I'll just go over it briefly, but the idea is that when you're in the womb, they now know that there's a lot of consciousness there. A few years ago, they found out that the baby can hear all the music. Baby tends to like Bach, but doesn't like a lot of Vivaldi. And Beethoven, late sonatas, forget it. But the baby responds to everything that the mother is feeling. Not only everything the mother is feeling, but to what the father says and the mother says. So there's not only an intuitive grasp of feeling, but an accurate perception of language, to the degree that by doing sound filming of fetuses in the womb, after the age of 3 months or so, they can see that the baby's muscles are responding, and the muscles respond differently to a verb than to a noun, and even respond to particles and ins and tos. So that's absolutely amazing. They're perceiving accurate, incredible, detailed language. And mothers, in a way, have always known that, but it's usually forgotten. And therefore, the mother has to be careful what she says. And a friend of mine wrote the book called The Secret Life of the Unborn Child. And a friend of mine was having a baby, and she was angry over a number of things, including the fact that the pregnancy was hard, and that she wasn't sure that she wanted a baby just then, and so on. So I called him up and I said, "What do you think she should do?" And he said, she should express the anger that she feels, because the baby would feel it anyway. And then she should take a rocking chair, one that she intends to rock the baby in later, and she should sit down with the baby inside there and say, "I want to tell you something now. You know, this is the way it feels to me right now, because I wanted to do this and to do this. But don't pay much attention to it, because I really love you as a baby, and I can feel you in there," and so on and so on. Got to say both sides of it. Baby's going to hear both sides. I thought that was amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So, all right, so then when you come out of the womb until birth, until about 1.5, you have a very intense love affair with your mother. And this is a continuation of the love affair that was in the womb. However, they feel that in the womb, you feel yourself to be a queen or a princess or a prince or something who's fed all the time. Not even aware in a certain sense of the mother. When you come out, gradually you're finding out that you have to establish a reciprocal connection with this other thing there. And the mother has her job to do. It turns out that babies, their nervous system is so fantastic, especially young girl babies, that when the mother talks to them and looks at them and says things to them, they begin to really heat up. And they can go wild like that. And the baby then learns to turn away, to cut down the intensity by turning her own face. That means the baby learns that she has power. I can change this relationship with this woman and the intensity by just turning my face a little bit. But the mother's job is equally deep. The mother has to respond to everything the baby says. If the baby is feeling sad, that's got to be seen on the mother's face. If the baby is feeling joyful, it has to be registered on the mother's face. This comes out of Winnicott and people like that who have done attachment theory. And I read a little detail the other day that the 3rd generation of attachment people have developed a single sentence: a blank face is a biological crime. So if one of your children comes up to you at whatever age and says, oh, I really got hurt today, you know, you can't go into your heroic shit and say, well, you know, just keep a stiff upper lip. While you're saying that, your face is blank. Is that right? So the first thing you have to do is to look really sad and allow the sadness of the child who's just hurt the knee come into you. And after that, you say what you want. But a blank face is a biological crime. So, therefore, that's amazing stuff. That's amazing stuff. Some mothers are better at that than others. Second detail. In the first year and a half, the mother is the one who is talking to you and being with you. She is the one who is changing you. She is the one who is touching your balls. She is the one who is cooing over you and touching you and putting little powders on you and so on. That's understood to be a fantastically sensual, sexual, ecstatic state. So, times were good then. Now, and Joseph Campbell reminds us that in the Middle Ages, for example, if you're reading along in one of the Grail legends, you'll find out that one of the typical things they would do is put a young boy up on the table, and he'd be 1 or half or 2 years old, and all the women would tickle him in the balls and everything like that. And they got good table walkers in, boy. Whoa. So, that's why they like the Middle Ages. I mean, so now a sad thing comes, and I'm going to jump ahead here, but I'll lose this if I don't tell you now. There's a fine book published called The Way Men Think by Liam Hudson and his wife, and they concentrate on this moment right here. And they say that ecstatic feeling that you had with your mother, sensually ecstatic, emotionally ecstatic, was so powerful that when it became clear to you that you're not to be with this gender, you're not belong to this gender, you belong to something called masculinity. The feeling is that a girl baby only has to disidentify herself with her mother's personality. She can stay with this gender that's given her so much sensual ecstasy. But we, as boys, have to split off and head off towards masculinity. Do you hear that? That the pain of leaving, turning our back on the gender that gave us so much sensual and spiritual and joy ecstasy, that pain is so terrific that you'll never be able to lie down again with a naked woman with full heart. The shock of that break is so intense that you go into a kind of painful orbit for years. So a woman doesn't do that because she only disidentified with her mother's personality, but she still stayed identified with the gender that fed her and gave her all that stuff. We have to disidentify with that gender and say we're going somewhere else. So naturally, after you finish making love and you're 25, you say, well, who would like to play tennis now? And you got to forgive yourself for that. That's called a distance that's built into you because of this necessity to disidentify with the whole female gender. Do you hear what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The distance is built into the male, and women will never understand how deeply that distance is built in. And it's a part of our genius, too. Because out of that we can become nuclear scientists, Michelangelo, Leonardo. We can pull ourselves back from things and look at them, pull away. You understand what I'm saying? Part of our genius is a distance. But then, just to finish this little detail about the sensuality, it's important that you realize that this distance, even though it's nothing to be ashamed of, you're not to be ashamed that you have tremendous distance. Nevertheless, it's wise to try to close it as much as possible. As you get older, to become closer to people. Do you understand me? Mm-hmm. Let's take that moment again when you're in bed and you've made love and you have the impulse to get up and go somewhere. That's very harmful to the woman. One way you can say that is that we are penetrated. Our body is intended to penetrate other things, even animals, lances, everything. That's our body is made for that. The woman's body is made to be penetrated and to hold what comes in. Now, the only time we're really penetrated is when the mother puts a nipple in her mouth. That's enough. We don't ever want to be penetrated again. That's why I realize when my wife tries to put grapes in my mouth, I don't want it. That's our fear of homosexuality, is the fear of being penetrated. Right? We want to do the penetration. So therefore, the idea is this. When you're making love, you have penetrated the woman's sexual center. And that was good, and that was fine. That was your thing. That was what you do. But it's going to turn now, and what she wants to do is penetrate your heart.
That's right.
That's the next step. It's the next proper step. And the only way that can happen is if you remain in bed in an open, clear way, affectionate way, so that she has time then to bring forward her power, which is to penetrate your heart area. Hmm?
Yeah.
So without that second step, it's not real lovemaking. And that's one reason that American women are getting more and more and more turned off from lovemaking. Because we don't know how to do that. And the more pressure there is for speed and everything in modern life, the less we do it. Is that right? And the more action movies in which nothing happens but action. Do you know those things are totally insane? Like they're switching the film clips. I went to see one time in Minneapolis last year one of those old movies that the Indians made, Rajit Rai, one of those movies that goes so slowly. And yeah, what?
Satyajit Ray.
God. And there's a girl that gets sick there, and then you watch some butterflies on a pond for about a minute and a half.
Just
Yeah, when they tell you that she's sick.
Sitar music. That's right.
Boy, it's slow. Boy, it's slow.
It's beautiful.
And then as a trailer to that, they put on an American movie, boom, 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 exploding, people going out windows, ah. And you really had a feeling, this is insane. These people are really profoundly insane. They should all be locked up. But they don't lock them up. They give them a place in Hollywood. So therefore, just say how destructive that is to the whole of human life, that everything has to pass swiftly and quickly, and we don't have time to stay in bed. Am I saying anything to you with that?
Yes.
So that's an adult thing to learn to do.
Could you do that first?
I beg your pardon?
Could you switch it?
No.
Let her penetrate your heart first by embracing.
Well, of course you need to do that. But that doesn't excuse you for the second one. Because the woman has been activated by the penetration that you have done. And now it's her job, her task, her time to do this. So doing it ahead of time wouldn't be the same. So I just wanted to leave you with that idea, which is connected to that situation that when we were 1 to 1.5, we had an intense love affair with our mothers. And it was very gorgeous. Okay.
Let me read a poem right here.
Sure.
That's also the point, Robert, where the man becomes the woman.
Yes,
That way the
he agrees.
becomes the man. It's
Yep,
where
that's
the balance
exactly
is
right.
nurturing. It's also the most vulnerable place for both parties.
Yep. And it's not visible, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Let me read you a poem here that just says what, hopefully not as well, but some way, another way, about this being able to receive that. There are roads going into you no one has walked on before. Yesterday, before I discovered one of them, I saw a silver light given off from the slender arch of your foot as you shed tears that fell on my cheek. The water that came from your eyes seemed to come from some river no one had drunk from before. And this is the reason why I wanted to read this poem, this one line. As we sat there quietly confusing proximity with its distant cousin, closeness, I thought about cupping my hands and kneeling into you for a drink. Instead, I picked you up and carried you to my bed. It was only after you left that I realized how thirsty I was for the water you wanted me to drink.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Good.
Hear it again?
It's not very old, so good things are happening to him.
Yeah, I just read. Yeah, I'm not very old, or it's not very
No,
old.
the poem is not very old, you know. It's not like
Couple
you
of
wrote it 20
days
years
ago.
ago.
There are roads going into you that no one has walked on before. Yesterday, before I discovered one of them, I saw a silver light given off from the slender arch of your foot as you shed tears that fell on my cheek. The water that came from your eyes seemed to come from some river no one had drunk from before. As we sat there quietly, one more time, confusing proximity with its distant cousin, closeness. I thought about cupping my hands and kneeling into you for a drink. Instead, I picked you up and carried you to my bed. It was only after you left that I realized how thirsty I was for the water you wanted me to want.
To drink.
Or to
You
drink.
said last
Yeah,
time.
maybe that's all right. Did I say that?
Yeah, you said to drink.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Write it down.
That's better. I got
better.
it. Yeah, I like it.
It is better.
I got it better. So,
Here it is.
She's drinking.
okay, you can talk again. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just thinking about this little poem. When I was thinking of one of his, I was thinking about one I wrote. Every breath taken by the man who loves and the woman who loves goes to fill the water tank where the spirit horses drink. In relation to this, like, unless the whole sequence had been done, there's no water for the spirits to come and drink from. Maybe, I don't know. It's just a poem, I don't know what it means. Every breath taken by the man who loves and the woman who loves goes to fill the water tank where the spirit horses drink. So you have to imagine some people called spirit horses who need a drink. And in a way, they drink better from tanks that are near beds where we've been making love than they do from Buddhist temples. In a certain sense. Don't want to push it too hard, but I haven't insulted Buddhists yet today. But I love Buddhists at a distance. All right.
There you go, you got it.
Did I get it? Okay. All right, let's go on now. This is interesting. From 1.5 years until 3, there's an intense love affair with your father. With your father. From 1.5 years to 3. About 1.5 years, your attention begins to shift over to this large male that's been hanging around the house, bothering everybody. And then something happens in which there's something in the little male body that begins to respond to this strange creature. And you soon realize that he plays differently with you than your mother does. He throws you up in the air and all of a sudden says, wow, wow. And something happens here in which you go deeply into a love affair. Now the interesting thing is that this is usually forgotten because it takes place before the time of articulate speech. Now the second time you're going to have a strong relationship with your father is in adolescence. And then it's going to be angry because it's a problem with the mother and all of those things. So one of the men who's done a lot of work on this is Peter Blos, B-L-O-S. He's a great Freudian on adolescence. In one of his books he said, I can't tell you how many times I have had young men come into me and their parents bring them in and they start talking about their fathers and they're screaming and carrying on, and this goes on 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, and finally when the whole thing, he's expressed every anger against he has his father, and I say to him, well, is there anything else you haven't said? And he suddenly breaks into sobbing, and he sobs for 2 hours because he's remembering the love affair from 1.5 to 3, but he cannot verbalize that in the way that he can verbalize the anger. And so you have to realize that this happened, and this love affair between 1.5 and 3 gives you a solid base for being affectionate towards men and admiring men for the rest of your life. And as soon as I said that, then I put in the book, I think I put this in the last book, and I just said, I didn't want to say much about men stuff, but I did say one thing. I said, the strangest thing is that when we're together in the woods for a week, about the 3rd day, some trust begins to come among men. On the 4th day, you see them with their arms around each other everywhere, walking and so on. And the women are astounded because they think we're there criticizing women. But that isn't happening at all. And so I think that one thing happens then when the men get together in the woods like that and are with it, is that they begin remembering that time with their father. And I said, I think that must be the case because many men have said to me, after I got home, I called my father.
Yes.
And I said to him, how you doing? You know, would you like us to go somewhere or something like that? And the women can sense a change in the men when they come home. Because the women don't want us to be separated from our fathers. They would like us to remember that time when we had the love affair with our father. So to me, that's a very important piece of evidence. And then Bloss is right when he says, what is going on with the Freudian analysts that they keep talking only about the antagonistic stuff with the father? And they do not talk about this early time.
Yeah.
You can't expect women to talk about it because they wouldn't know about it. But, so I think that's one thing I learned that really amazed me. So, therefore, I mean, I obviously had a strong love affair with my father. I mean, don't say obviously, I think so. Because when I'm at that age and I go back to that time, I can remember tremendous admiration for him as such and so and such and so. But I was born in 26, and I suppose he became an alcoholic probably around 1935, which would have been 7 or 8 years old for me. And therefore, what I primarily remember and talk about is the time after he became an alcoholic. Is that right? And that had its own material, and I watched that and so on. But when I was trying to do my poems about my father in this last book, which is called Meditations on the Insatiable Soul, I'm already 50 years old, 55 years old. And then when I'm sitting with him, something else of that comes in. And you can feel him in a way. I started to read those poems, and they would be, you know, first poems I'd ever written on the father. The alcoholism was in there, and my anger at the shame and all that. And the man comes up to me and says, you know something, Robert, those are love poems.
There you go.
Whoa. He said, yeah, those are all love poems, Robert. You ought to realize that. So I just want to say that, and just to leave that with you. And remember that your father didn't remember his love affair with his own father either. And nothing in his culture asked him to remember that. And most of us don't remember ours. But there are things that are asking us to remember it. All right. Anyone want to say anything about that? So that's 1.5 to 3.
What happens if the father's not around?
Then you won't have that experience. And that's a lot of the grief in the country.
What if the grandfather's there?
The grandfather would work fine, sometimes better. The split families, the loss of the extended families means everything depends on the father being there. Yeah.
But if the father is being Mr. Mom from birth to 1.5, and he's changing the diapers and he's putting the baby powder on the ball.
I don't know. I'll ask my teacher. I don't know. It seems like a double love affair with the father. I don't know. I don't know what that would be like. But there aren't many doing that. Do you think so? Did that happen to you? No.
A lot today.
That's a lot today.
A lot today, yeah.
This country, yeah.
Even McDonald's has baby changers.
I don't think we can ever overdo closeness between the father and the children. So I'm not worried about that one. Yep.
I remember my love affair with my dad. Like I said, he died when I was 8, but he used to take us hiking a lot between 3 and 5, I remember, in Laurel, Maryland, on the Patuxent River. And we were going back there and running. I'm a long-distance runner, and just running along that river and having these memories come up. I was just weeping, these tears of joy.
Yes.
I remember this drunk man lying on a rock. And I said, is he dead, Dad? And he said, no, he's just a town drunk. And it just, I had those memories repressed for years.
Yeah.
It was very joyous.
So it's important to try to remember some of those, yeah.
I definitely feel that as I go through the anger, feel it, move it, process it, and it gets lighter. And as it gets lighter, then there's more space to feel that initial. There's more permission to feel
That's right.
that initial bond.
Yeah.
That's right.
That I was so angry
Yep.
about being disconnected with.
Yep. And you see, that's what John is saying too. Unless that anger, and you learn how to express it clearly and well, then you won't get back to that place.
Right. This is I believe the ability to feel the sweetness is in direct proportion to feel the bitterness and the pain and the hurt, and to get it literally out of the cells as much as possible, so that the other information that's in the cells can surface. And you stated it as beautifully as I've ever heard it stated.
Yes, sir.
So,
And then another thing is to know that in your cells there is laid down already a good relationship with your father. That's laid down. And even though you have difficulty in adolescence talking with your father, you still got a geological deposit in there.
That's right.
So that's a lot of help to me, because my father being dead now, and he appears to me sometimes And now I'm able to say, well, he's coming here not in his position as a man who died, but as in a position as he was when I was 1.5 to 3 years old. That's what I'm seeing. There's no hostility here. He wants to remind me of that time. So, dreams have been good that way. All right. Then, from 3 to 5, there is a situation which you can call the anguished threesome. There was a joyful threesome from 1 to 1 and nothing to 1.5 with your mother. There's a joyous twosome again with your father from 1.5 to 3, and now you got to face both of them. So this is 3 to 5, anguished party of 3. And you love your mother, and this son of a bitch apparently does too. And this is not fun. Basically, it's, Mama, when can we kill him? And she hears it, and she says, just wait a few years, you know. You and me, honey, we'll go to Jamaica. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of danger in that 3 to 5 stuff. So, and then passions come up, sexual passions, and, you know, boys actually, I mean, it's true with daughters, too, this time from 3 to 5. And my daughter said to my wife when she was about 3, and she said, I'm going to marry Daddy when I grow up. And she said, oh, no, you're not. Because I'm married to him already. There was a long pause, and this 3-year-old said, how long do you think you'll live, Mama? She was checking it out, you know. So from 3 to 5 is that incredible stuff that begins all the triangles that we'll ever get in for the rest of our lives. Then we're just going to do this fast. From 5 to 7, there's what Freud described as a latency period. Everything calms down. Your mother doesn't look so attractive to you anymore. Your father doesn't look so disgusting. And in a way, it's a time for the soul to open up and get excited about the world. And you begin to notice how some people are admired and some people aren't. Some people who don't have any power come in with this kind of dress on, and others have that kind of dress on. This is, you know, Jane Austen stuff, and all of that incredible sense of the different levels of the world, and how do you get into a position of power. You know, it's incredible. And incredible intellectual stuff goes on about the world, and the complicated brain begins to develop, and so on. And then from 5 to 11 is a latency period, and then from 11 to 18 or something is adolescence. So now you're coming back into an anguished threesome again. So let's just say 4 things that happen in adolescence. The first thing that happens in adolescence, I'll just use an imagery. There's a thing called the Oedipal wall. It's your father's wall. And somewhere between 11 and 18 you come up to it. Boom! It's right there. And then you start to climb it. And when you get up on top, your father's already there. And then you have what you call wrestling on top of the wall with your father. And you either win or you lose. You get pushed off or you push him off. Well, if we had time, we'd read together Franz Kafka's great story called The Judgment. One of the greatest stories ever written. In it, a young man is there with his old father. And he says to the father, you're not looking well. I think you better move into my room. My room has a little more sunlight in it. The man says, oh. So he calls, you get a sick feeling right away. This young man's not going to stand up for himself. Carries the father into that room. The father says, they both have a business, and the father said, what happened to your friend that went to Russia? Oh, he says, he's doing well. I thought that I might write him and tell him that I was going to be married, but I haven't done it. And you find out that he's afraid to tell his friend in Russia that he's going to be married. So the son is a soft person of some kind. And the father says, I know more about your friend in Russia than you do. He's been writing me letters for years. I know everything about his love affairs and everything in Russia more than you do. You want to read his letters? And so the father's pulling in heavy machinery here, right? And the son begins to get weaker and weaker. And finally, the boy says to the father, I'll carry you to the new room. And he carries the father into the new room, and the father's an old baby who's playing with his watch chain. But as soon as he puts him in the bed, The father leaps and touches the ceiling with his fingers and says, I am going to marry your bride. She has been dealing with me, not you, you fool, and so on. And there's a case in which the father demolishes the son totally. And the son turns pale and rushes down the stairs, this is in Prague, and throws himself over the river. And there's a brilliant last 3 lines. And he rushed down to the river, and he threw himself over the railing. And as he did, he said, my parents were always proud of me when I did athletic things in high school. And then, as he slips into the river, he says, dear parents, I loved you all the same. And the falling of the body was wiped out by the rush of the cars going over the bridge. And that's the end of the story. It's called The Judgment. The Judgment by Franz Kafka. So Kafka was someone who lost the Oedipal battle. All of us have fought it, is that right? It doesn't matter in a way if you win or lose. I think the major thing is that you fought it and called your father some names or whatever. Just to fight it is something. Just to fight it and lived is enough. Am I saying anything or not? I'm having pity now for the young men who don't have any fathers. Who can't have this, what?
The worst thing is to win it.
The worst thing is to win. Give me an example. What do you mean?
Because if you win it, then you end up with your mother.
That's it.
And you can never leave.
Yeah. And then we got to say that one of the things happened here, 35% of the families have no fathers in them now. And that means that, that what you wanted when you were 3 to 5 was to get your mother. And it turns out that you got her. And you know what to do with it. That's a situation. That's a very different situation than fighting with your father.
If your father runs out on your mother, then you can never grow up. If your father decides he will have his adolescence rather than you're having yours, then you can't have your adolescence.
That's right, that's what we're saying.
Uh-huh. So what do you think, Frank? Do you think that if the son doesn't have a father in the house, the image I have is that what happens now is that a lot of young men come up to the Oedipal wall, and then there's no father there to say, what are you doing, you little shit down there? And they curve over like that and they go back toward the mother. I mean, that's called rock music in some extent. And then there's death waiting for you when you go back and make that curve back to the mother. That's Kurt Cobain's suicide. He didn't have any father. And when he came to the wall, there was nothing there, and he turned and went back and gets caught by death. I'm just trying to scare you. We just say we have to have compassion for these young men who don't have anyone to fight with on the Oedipal wall. And Frank, do you think that a man can then fight with another older man instead of his father?
He will spend the rest of his life fighting with bosses,
With bosses?
fighting with mentors, fighting with any older man who will fight with him in his efforts to continually get reassured that he's man enough. But if he doesn't have a father to work this out with, then he can't really marry very successfully because women are too powerful to him.
Too powerful to him?
Women are too powerful. He requires them to affirm him as a man. But he's also frightened of their power, so he's having to escape them. So he goes through life seducing and abandoning women and abandoning wives. He can't know what it feels like to be a father because he didn't know one, so he doesn't know how to be a father.
Yep. So we're talking here about the sibling society, and I really get angry as I read through the literature and see how much the feminists of the 19th century wanted to destroy the family.
They did.
Get rid of that vestige of patriarchy. Well, they succeeded. It wasn't they that succeeded. I mean, they had a desire for it, but it was also the corporations in the United States who wanted to sell things directly to the kids, and so they came in between the mother and the father. And I gave a little talk in New York. A man came up to me and he said, listen, Robert, I'm not the father of my son. The Nike manufacturer is the father. So he was really clearly seeing he'd been outflanked by the corporations. So there's a number of things that have resulted in the fleeing of the fathers and the loss of that, but we really have to look at how much damage that does. Want to say anything about that, John? So we could talk about this one a long time. But let's go on. Talking about things that are accomplished in adolescence. One of the important things is to have that fight with your father. Second thing is to be able to renounce your mother. To renounce your mother. To renounce that ecstasy you had with her when you were 1.5 years old. To renounce her as an object of sexuality and love. To renounce her and replace her with a woman your own age. That's called falling in love when you're 13 or 14. But it's easier said than done. To renounce your mother.